Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Agung Wibowo. My number is 2088-2030-01. And here I want to read a novel written by Stephen King, horror story. Yeah. Okay. Here I want to read from chapter 2. So I'm not read from chapter 1, but I'm just chapter 2 though. Okay, let we start it. Okay, sitting up in bed, his cheeks still flushed with heat, but his fever like that candace kick. Finally, receding. Bill had finished the boot, but when Georgie reached for it, Bill held it out for a reach. Now get me paraffin. What's that? Where is it? It's on the cellar shelf. As you go downstairs, Bill said, in a book that says Gulf. Gulf. Bring that to me, and a knife and a bowl and a pack of matches. Georgie had gone obediently to get these things. He could hear his mother playing the piano, not for Elise, no, but something else he didn't like so well. Something that sounded dry and fuzzy. He could hear rain flicking steadily against the kitchen windows. These were comfortable sounds, but the thought of the cellar was not a bit comfortable. He did not like the cellar, and he did not like going down the cellar stairs, because he always imagined there was something down there in the dark. That was silly, of course. His father said so, and his mother said so, and even more important, Bill said so. But still, he did not even like opening the door to flick on the light, because he always had the idea this way, so exquisitely stupid he didn't dare tell anyone. That while he was feeling for the light switch, some horrible cloth bow would settle lightly over his wrist, and then jerk him down into the darkness that smelled of dirt and wet and dim-root vegetables. Stupid! There were no thing with clothes, all hairy and full of killing spidey. Every now and then someone went crazy and killed a lot of people. Sometimes Chad Huntley told about weirdo monsters living down in their cellar. Still, this idea lingered in the interminable the drum jam in a death grip. The cellar smell seemed to intensity until it filled the word smell. The smell of the monster, the apotheosis of all monster. It was the smell of something for which he had no name. The smell of it, crouched and lurking and ready to spring. A creature which would eat anything, but which was especially hungry for boiled meat. Whoa. He had opened the door that morning and had groped interminable for the switch, holding the jam in his usual death grip, his eyes squinted shut. The tip of his tongue poked from the corner of his mouth like an agonized ruthless searching for water in a place of drought. Funny. Sure, you betcha. Look at you, Georgie. Georgie's scared of the dark. What a baby. The sound of a piano came from what his father called the living room and what his mother called the parlor. It sounded like music from another world, far away, the way talk and laughter on a summer crowded beach must sound to an exhausted, swimmer who struggles with the undertow. His finger found the switch. They snapped it, and nothing to light. Oh, cripes, the power! Georgie snatched his arm back of it as if from a basket filled with snake. He stepped back from the open cellar door, his heart hurrying in his chest. The power was out, of course. He had forgotten that the power was out. You silly crow, what now? Go back and tell Bill he couldn't get the book of paraffin because the power was out, and he was afraid that something might get creature much worse than either. That it would be simple, Slither pulled herself up between the stair rises and grabbed his ankle. That would go over big, wouldn't it? Others might laugh at such a fancy, but Bill wouldn't laugh. Bill would be mad. Bill would say, "Grow up, Georgie, do you want this boat or not?" As if this thought were his cue, Bill called from his bedroom, "Did you die? Or there, Georgie?" "No, I'm getting it, Bill." Georgie called back at once. He rubbed at his arms, trying to make the guilty ghost flesh disappear and his smooth skin again. "I just stopped up to get a drink of water." "Well, hurry up," Bill said. So he walked down the first step to the cellar shelf, his heart a warm, beating hammer in his throat. The hair on the nape of his neck standing at attention, his eyes hot, his hand cold, showed that at any moment the cellar door would swing shut on its own, closing off the white light falling through the kitchen windows, and then he would hear it. Something worse than all the commies and mothers in the world, worse than the Japs, worse than Adela the Hun, worse than Adela the Hun, worse than the something in 100 horror movie. It, growling deeply, he would hear the growl in those lunatic seconds before it pounced on him and unzipped his gates. The cellar smell was worse than ever today because of the flood. Their house was high on still standing water down that had seeped in through a rock foundation. The smell was low and unpleasant, making you want to take only this salvage breath. Georgie sifted through the junk on the shelf as fast as he could. Old cans of kiwi Windex, an old flat of turtle wax. For some reason, this can struck him, and he spent nearly 30 seconds looking at the turtle on the lid with a kind of hypnotic wonder. Then he tossed it back, and here it was at last, a square box with the word "golf" on it. Georgie snatched it and ran up the stairs as fast as he could. Suddenly, aware that his shirt tail was out and suddenly showed that his shirt tail would be his undoing. The thing in the cellar would allow him to get almost all the way out, and then it would grab the tail of his shirt and snatch him back. And he reached the kitchen and swept the door shut behind him. It banged ghastly. He leaned back against it with his eyes closed. Sweat pooped out on his arm and forehead. The box of paraffin gripped tightly in one hand. The piano had come to a stop, and his mom's voice floated at him. "Georgie, can you slam the door a little harder next time? Maybe you could break some of the plates in the Welsh dresser if you're really tired." Salah. "Maybe you could break some of the plates in the Welsh dresses if you really tried." "Sorry, Mom," he called back. "Georgie, you waste," Bill said from his bedroom. He pitched his voice low so their mother would not hear. Georgie snickered a little. His fear was already gone. It had slipped away from him as easily as a nightmare slips away from a man who awakes. Cold-skinned and gasping from its grip, who feels his body and stares at his surroundings to make sure that none of it ever happened, and who then begins at once to forget it. Half is gone by the time his feet hit the floor, 3/4 of it by the time he emerges from the shower and began to towl off. All of it by the time he finished his breakfast, all gone. Until the next time, when, in the grip of the nightmare, all fears will be remembered. The turtle. Georgie thought, going to the counter drawer where the matches were kept. Where did I see a turtle like that before? But an answer came, and dismissed the question. He got back of matches from the drawer, a knife from the rack, and a small bottle from the Welsh dresser in the dining room. Then he went back into Bill's room. What an hole you are, Georgie, Bill said, airily enough, and pushed back a bottle of fixed Weber rub, the smell of which Bill would associate all his life with thick. But a little Richard turned very softly. However, so softly that little Richard was robbed of all his raw and elemental power. Their mother, who had studied classical piano at Juilliard, had rock and roll. His mom had rock and roll. She did not merely dislike it; she abominated it. "I'm not a hole," Jody said, sitting on the edge of Bill's bed and putting the things he had gathered on the night table. "Yes, you are," Bill said. "Nothing but a great big brown hole, that's you." Georgie tried to imagine a kid who was nothing but a great big hole and legs and began to giggle. "Your hole is bigger than Augusta," Bill said, beginning to giggle too. "For a hole is bigger than the whole state," Georgie replied. This broke both boys up for nearly 2 minutes. There followed a whispered conversation on the shot which meant very little to anyone which a hole was the brownest, and so on. Finally, Bill said one of the forbidden words. He accused Georgie of being a big brown shitty a hole. And they both got laughing hard. Bill's laughter turned into a coughing fit as it finally began to taper off. The piano stopped again. They both looked in the direction of the parlor, listening for the piano bench of scrap back, listening for their mother's impatient footstep. Bill buried his mouth in the crook of his elbow, like this, stealing at the last of cough, pointing at the pitcher at the same time. Georgie poured him a glass of water, which he drank off. The piano began once more, for Elise again. Shattering will never forget the piece, and even many years later, I'd never failed to bring Gustav his arm and back. His heart would drop, and he would remember, "My mother was playing that the day Georgie died." Yeah. You gonna cough anymore, Bill? No. Bill pulled a Kleenex from the book, made a rumbling sound in his chest, spat phlegm into the tissue, straightened it up, and tossed into the waste basket by his bed, which I filled with similar twists of tissue. Then he opened the box of paraffin and dropped a waxy cube of the stuff in his palm. Georgie watched him closely, but without speaking or questioning. Bill didn't like Georgie talking to him while he did stuff, but Georgie had learned that if he just kept his mouth shut, Bill would usually explain what he was doing. Bill used a knife to cut off a small piece of the paraffin cube. He put the piece in the bowl, then struck a match and put it on top of the paraffin. The two boys watched the small yellow flame as the dying line drove rain against the window in occasional spatters. Got to waterproof the boot, or it'll just get wet and sink, Bill said. When he was with Georgie, his shadow was light. Sometimes he didn't shadow at all. In school, however, it could become so bad that talking became impossible for him. Communication would cease, and Bill's schoolmate would look somewhere else with Bill clutched at the side of his desk, his face growing almost as red as his hair, his eyes squeezed into slits as he tried to winch some word out of his stubborn throat. Sometimes, most time, the word would come. Other times, it simply refused. He had been hit by a car when he was 3 and knocked into the side of a building. He had remained unconscious for 7 hours. Mom said it was that accident which had caused the stutter. Georgie sometimes got the feeling that he's dead, and Bill himself was not so sure. The piece of paraffin in the bowl was almost entirely melted. The match flame got lower, growing blue as it hugged the cardboard stick, and then he smiled apologetically at Georgie. Hot, he said. After a few seconds, he dipped his finger in again and began to smear the wax along the sides of the boot, where it quickly dried a milky haze. Can I do some? Georgie asked. Okay, just don't get any of the blanket or Mom will kill you. Georgie dipped his finger into the paraffin, which was now very warm but no longer hot, and began to spread it along the other side of the boot. Don't put on so much, a hole, Bill said. You want to sing it on its maiden cruise? I'm sorry, Georgie answered. That's all right, just go easy. Georgie finished the other side, then held the boot in his hand. It felt a little heavier, but not much. Too cool, he said. I'm gonna go and sell it. Yeah, you do that. Yeah, you do that, Bill said. He suddenly looked tired and still not very well. I wish you could come, Georgie said. He really did. Bill sometimes got bossy after a while, but he always had the coolest ideas and he hardly ever hit it to board, really. She, Bill said. You call what she? She then. I wish I could come too, Bill said glumly. Well, Georgie shifted from one foot to the other, the boat in his hand. You put on your rain stuff, Bill said, or you'll wind up in the flow like me, probably cut it anyway from my germs. Thanks, Bill, it's a neat boat. And he did something he hadn't done for a long time. Something Bill never forget. He leaned over and kissed his brother's cheek. You'll catch it for sure now, you whole, Bill said, but he seemed cheered up all the same. Smiled at Georgie. Put all this stuff back too, or Mom will have a bird. Sure. He gathered up the waterproofing equipment and crossed the room. The boat perched precariously on top of the paraffin box, which has sitting askew in the little bowl. Georgie? Georgie turned back to look at his brother. Be careful, Sure. His brow creased a little. That was something your mom said, not your big brother. It was as strange as him giving Bill a kiss. Sure I will. He went out. Bill never saw him again. Thank you. I'm sorry if I had any mistake. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.